Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of Trek Prime. Not that
Mm.
big a moment for us. I think 35th is the more important, but 30 is a big deal to me. I'm
Yeah,
glad we got here. This is our last one before the holidays. Well, if you count New Year's, but
yeah,
anyway, because that's a holiday. They always call them the holidays. So, anyway, we're not really doing a movie or a subject within Star Trek, but more of a link to Star Trek 6, which we talked about last week. But it got me to thinking about, and I'm sure many of you who are over 30 remember the Star Trek 25th anniversary. Would you call it a docu-special or documentary or
yeah.
special?
It was a little bit of all each of. I think it kind of reflected on the history of Star Trek, and
Yes.
and then they did some stuff at the end that was with LeVar Burton and
What can we say we didn't say in Star Trek 6? I mean, you know how big the 23rd, 5th anniversary was, at least for us. This was the year where we were getting the last original cast movie, full
yeah,
original cast movie in Star Trek 6,
yeah,
which they hyped to death, at least where I was.
yeah,
And even during the special, I was just talking to you about how even in the ads, they had that Star Trek 6 trailer where the Excelsior and the Enterprise were blowing up into the logo and everything. And
yeah,
then when they did the actual show, they put that trailer into the show. They were
yeah,
really pushing that trailer. It was a big deal. This is the
yeah. I mean, they actually had a little bit of commentary from some of the actors that were in that movie. I think Marcia was in there
yeah,
somewhere.
Iman talked in that. So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but yeah, this is a big special. And they were talking about, oh, this is going to be on, and it was going to be on right before they premiered season 5 opener, Redemption 2 of TNG. So this is going to be a big Star Trek night. So yeah, it was a Star Trek, woohoo. So
Yeah,
I reviewed it again today, and you know something? I'll start from the top. Because there's an overriding thought I got here. It's hosted by William Shatner and the late Leonard Nimoy. And in the beginning, I don't know if you remember it, they did some very strange attempts at techno babble.
mm,
I thought it was kind of cute. They
yeah.
were talking about how they were going to talk about the past by means of, how do they say it? Digital computerization. It was just Nimoy trying to sound Star Trekky. No, it could have said, let's use it by the detector circuit. Yes, I got one in. I got one in the last couple of weeks. I got a detector circuit in.
Detective
They could have just used that term. And, it reminded me one thing about this. This was, I think, if I read it correctly, because there was a tribute at the end, the last project Gene Roddenberry was involved in during his lifetime.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he was executive producer of it. He was shown at the dedication for that 25th anniversary exhibit they had, where they had the two casts, the old and the new meet.
Yep.
And he was on a cane. He was looking a little older. But, you know, okay. Um, the interesting thing about this docu is that it was the first one I ever saw that mixed the environment of the 50s and the 60s
Hmm.
with Star Trek. It talked about the space race. It talked about, uh, when Star Trek went off the air, the moon landing was starting to happen.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Shatner even went back as far as Newton and Galileo.
Mm.
I mean, he was linking Star Trek to the very beginning of time. It was all very magisterial. And that was the first time I ever learned about Gene Roddenberry's history, how he had been in World War II, how he had been a troubleshooter for Pan Am, which I didn't know anything about, and some of his motivations for Star Trek. People like Robert Justman and Harlan Ellison hadn't put their books out yet, so I wasn't aware of all the sort of details, but it gave you a good framework. You came out of it knowing a little more about who Gene Roddenberry was, other than some guy who created Star Trek and what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
And anyway, I mean, I could go on and on about that, but is there anything in this area that you found interesting?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, you're right about that. At the beginning of it, they were kind of talking a lot. They went all the way back to where, they started doing. Remember, they were showing clips of these old black and white science fiction.
Yeah, like the old, like the From the Earth to the Moon, where they had that little can landing on the moon.
Yeah, and then they had this. I remember laughing at that scene where they looked like a giant turkey that was flying through the air, and it had this weird beak on it. And I don't even remember what movie that was from.
You know,
but
it's funny that I know you're talking about. They had these little people in rubber masks and stuff, and that little turkey thing flying around. That reminded me of some of that stuff in The Cage. You know, where Captain Pike is in that cage, and these little bird aliens kind of floating around in other parts of it, in other parts of the menagerie, and you don't see them again. They just kind of float around, like we're here by, you know, these little random aliens that don't have a purpose. They're just there to be seen.
Yeah.
And you know, I guess the whole point of that was to say, this is what sci-fi was before. You know, it was rubber masks and stuff for kids, basically. And
I guess it was treated kind of like, you know, like comic books were, you know, at the time. You know, it was just goofiness, and nobody gave it much thought.
Kid stuff. They thought of it as kid stuff.
So, I mean, Westerns were the thing, like, you know, like Shatner said. I mean, it was just, everything's Westerns back in those days. And
and I got a kick out of Roddenberry because he kind of put a little of his own verbal fine print in there. He said, well, the networks felt I gave them a wagon train to the stars. I had to sell it. He actually said it like that. Yeah. I think how he said it like a fine print thing. He said, but, you know, they felt a little deceived. I had to sell it. He's kind of pretending to think it. I got a kick out of the fact he put that fine print bit in there. Like, that's not really what it was, and we all know it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, obviously I can see them like, wagon train to the stars. It's going to be Star Wars. But anyway, so what they get is this thing about this guy where these aliens are trying to turn him on with this woman and all these psychological cerebral issues and basically this allegory about, well, God, you know, when The Cage was, you know.
Well, I mean, it kind of delved with the, you know, the idea of how somebody wishes they could be something that they're not, you know.
And they get it, basically.
Yeah, and they get it, and
except it's in the context of lack of freedom. This guy is trying to show these aliens are trying to show Pike how appealing it would be to live under their servitude with an illusion.
Yeah.
But, you know, like I said, it's not a Western. It's definitely something there's a lot to think about.
I mean, it's a definition of talking about humanity and how it feels in the future and stuff like that, you know, how it would deal with situations like that. And in Pike's case, it was more realistic because he didn't want to be in a cage. You know, he was trying to get out of it in any way he could do it, and he was getting violent. And, you know, it was just, you know, like Roddenberry was trying to say, it's the human condition, you know, in the future.
Right, and I can imagine these executives who are used to Bonanza and Gunsmoke seeing this.
But, you know, the funny thing is I've watched some of those Westerns back in those days, and, you know, a lot of them kind of explored, you know, issues like that in their own way.
What it was that they were looking for that bare-knuckle fist fight, and that's what Roddenberry was saying. Because Where No Man Has Gone Before, that wasn't an idiotic show either, but there's a bare-knuckle fist fight, we'll take it. I think Cage he did choke the companion at the end of it, but if there'd been more of a bare-knuckle fist fight, okay, this is fine. They were looking past all the intelligence stuff and trying, because some of the Westerns, like you said, if you look at the plot, they weren't stupid.
No, they weren't.
There was a lot of allegories in there about marriages and Native American culture and class issues that were kind of in there, but they had bare-knuckle fist fights, so...
Yeah.
You know, but you know, these guys, they wanted to see somebody shooting somebody.
Yeah. Well, that's I think that's the way people viewed science fiction in those days, was that everyone's going to be, you know, shooting, you know, like everything's going to be silly like that. Like
zap guns instead of 6-shooters, like Roddenberry.
That's what they were expecting, and they didn't get it. And they said, no. You know, you can't take a silly environment like this and try to make something serious out of it. You know what I'm saying? They wanted something different. You know, they wanted it to be more kid style. And
you're absolutely right about that. And you know, one thing about watching that show, the 25th anniversary, is that I didn't know until I saw that Star Trek was always in danger of being canceled. I thought it was only in the last year and that it was doing okay, but apparently they didn't want that show on, really. So you know, I mean, I know it had a fan base all through its run, and it actually won an Emmy, I believe. They were talking about, I don't want an Emmy for, but it won an Emmy.
Yeah, and was it that Harlan Ellison story there?
Well, allegedly.
There was a whole story to that, though.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even sure if we could do a podcast on that because there's so much intrigue.
I know.
I mean that's almost a mythos.
Yeah, that's a sinkhole and a half.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was Harlan Ellison. He's almost a Star Wars trail you know.
Yeah. The
So it goes on and on with him because there's all these things that are added. So, and I noticed he wasn't in that. Of course, it was celebrating Gene Roddenberry, so of course he wouldn't be in it.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's playing his own counter special of that. Thankfully, he didn't put it on.
Oh God.
Him sitting in a chair, like, yeah, you heard in the 25th anniversary. Here's the real story.
I think. Well, crap. They had him on that one thing with the Snyder there. I guess that.
Oh yes, the Everybody Smokes show. That one.
Yeah. And I mean, so you saw how that ended up.
Yeah, so I gather the Roddenberry's like, I don't want to give him a platform because he'll take over the show and it'll be 4 hours long with him. So
yeah, 5 minutes.
They didn't mention that episode at all. They just talked about the series in general.
Yeah.
And it's funny about that world. I mean, this may seem like nostalgia in the highest sense of the order, but I got to think about that world in '91. Okay, we just had 2 Star Treks out there. We had, well, actually 3. We had the movies, which counts as its own kind of world. We had the TOS and TNG. That was it. There was no Deep Space Nine, certainly no Voyager, no Enterprise, no nothing. Yeah, just those 2. So I noticed one thing they did is interviewed a lot of astronauts. That's one thing I noticed in there. They interviewed Buzz Aldrin, and they talked about the Next Generation a lot as the present one, as if that was going to be like the last big one they did, but it wasn't. One funny story was when the late Wally Schirra came on. He said he met Gene Roddenberry on a transatlantic flight one time, and Wally Schirra got into talking to him and said, "Why do you beam these people up and down all the time?" And Gene said, "Well, I couldn't figure out a way to land the ship," which we all know, but I find it interesting that being an astronaut, he's thinking of the lunar modules landing on the moon, and everything being multi-system, in NASA, rather than the Apollo astronauts beaming down to the moon. You had to have them land, but it made you realize how inventive some of these concepts. And then one thing I noticed it went into, and I would have loved to have been there in LA when they had that big convention where everybody was on the stage.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember hearing about that. There was this big thing. And they interviewed 2 women who thought they'd be the only ones. I don't know if you remember them. They were talking, they said, we thought we'd be the only ones at the door. They couldn't get in there. But, I mean, if I went to a convention in LA, I would expect to have a 2-day advance situation because the whole cast is going to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, because again, there was we even got the convention up here, which I mentioned in the Star Trek 6 one. And I remember, even though it was bigger in the 25th anniversary one, now I haven't researched this, but they had a guy talking about the official Star Trek fan club. I don't know if you remember it. They had magazines.
Yeah. I used to get those. Yeah.
Whatever happened to that? Do they still do that, or is that kind of over?
Oh, well, I think they kind of went internet for a while. I don't even know if they're still out there. Did
that kind of merge into Star Trek Online or StarTrek.com?
So, I mean, it kind of, I think it merged with other different things now, and it's a different outfit now than it was when it started.
They used to send those magazines, and I don't know if there were the perks you could get.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff that was in those magazines you can get online now in various Star Trek websites. So it was really pointless now to even continue it. I mean, if you
think about it, magazines are kind of pretty much obsolete, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the interviews that they would put in the magazines. I mean, when they do interviews now, you can see them on YouTube or some other medium. What's the point? And of course, magazines today are very expensive. I mean,
right, because they're collector magazines.
Yeah.
Because now they don't need magazines every week practically because, like you said, online.
That's right.
So they have to focus on collectors more.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I quit buying those magazines in the late '90s and stuff like that, because I had so many of them. I was putting them away in these tote boxes, and they just sit around and they weigh like a tree when you try to move them around. So it's like, why do I put myself through this? What's the point of lugging this from a place to place?
Here's the funny thing about the Star Trek convention I went to. Speaking of 25th anniversary, I remember. What was one of the things you think I bought at the convention? I bought one of the Star Trek magazines. And the reason I bought it was one that was really tough to find in the stores. And it was from season 2. I think it's in the best shape, actually, because I bought it in a Mylar container and I keep it in there. Yeah. It's one that has a concept picture of Worf with a yellow uniform on the cover.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That was hard to get in the stores, but I get a copy there. And they used to do episode previews.
Yep.
And but I don't think Enterprise even had a thing like that.
I don't think so.
I think by Voyager, they were kind of... Did they even survive in Voyager, that magazine?
It's Yeah, I really don't know. I don't think so. If they did, it wasn't very popular because I don't remember seeing anything like that on the
I think they
show.
kind of quit mid-90s. I don't remember seeing them after a
Yeah.
while.
I
The
mean, I think,
Starlog put that out.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I remember Starlog used to have stuff for Star Trek on their
And the
magazine.
last thing I ever read in Starlog was about Seven of Nine coming on the show, and then Starlog disappeared off the racks.
Yeah.
And I used to see that as a paperback. Remember them? Again, no longer here. The little bookstore in Maine for all those who weren't here. Or some are part of New England anyway. I don't know if they were outside of Maine, but they closed down. But I used to go there and see all those magazines. And
Yeah.
it's not here. And I can't show you a picture because we don't have the setup. Maybe I can. There was a 25th anniversary Star Trek magazine that came out, and it was one of those thick collector magazines. Like I think the first one I ever saw. Remember how when they'd have a movie come out, they do a really thick magazine for it?
Yeah.
Um,
It would be like a magazine just for that movie or something. You even have like posters and inserts on the inside you could pull out, hang up, and
let me see if I can find a picture.
that was the only reason why I would buy the magazine was because of the posters they would have inside the the magazine itself.
Here we go. That's what
yeah.
And mine is still practically a showroom blue jay because that thing, I mean, it's not really, but it's basically made of steel as far as paper.
Yeah.
That thing and that thing was $6.95. Remember when $6.95 was really expensive? That was really expensive at the time. I mean, the equivalent like a $15 magazine. That seemed like a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that was like a birthday gift or something or an early Christmas gift. That was a big deal. And the pages were, I remember leafing through that thing to death and it would never die. It would close up and be perfect.
Yeah.
That magazine was made to last.
That's right.
I used to love, because back then there was no internet, so that was your only Star Trek source for the next month or so.
Yeah.
But it had good information in it. It was a good companion to the show, at least as I thought. But LeVar Burton at Space Camp, that was another special feature, because when I was a kid, I used to watch Reading Rainbow a lot, and that's how I first heard about LeVar.
Yeah.
So then when TNG came on, my father said, "Oh yeah, he's going to be in the show as a guy who's blind." I'm like, "Oh yeah, Reading Rainbow guy's going to be in it." So, it was interesting to see him adopt that persona to go to space camp, because at that time I wanted to go to space camp. But one of the things I noticed is that they're going to put me in that multi-axis. That thing was spun all over the place. But now I know if you're on one of those things, you have to look directly in front of you. Like it's something that doesn't move.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would probably go dizzy. So it moves you all around. But it was interesting to see space camp and the equipment they had and kind of compare contemporary training on the space shuttle. But, isn't it weird? The 25th anniversary was trying to correlate the present with Star Trek. And now that itself is a period piece.
Yeah.
Because it's the last gasp of Gene Roddenberry. It's the last thing I believe he did.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but you kind of see it was a slightly different environment. The reason why I mention this is, and this could go into a whole other conversation, but maybe I should get to that later because that's toward the end of it. But and they appeared, I think. You remember a movie called Trekkies?
Oh yeah, I saw a while back.
It was an actual docu-movie they did. It was made during Voyager.
Yeah.
And it was exploring Star Trek fans. It wasn't that bad. It was kind of an addendum to the Star Trek 25th anniversary. They had a return of two guys who were in it, and I had no idea who they were. I know now. Are you familiar with the radio show host Mark and Brian?
Yeah.
They apparently played some of the Tarchan and aliens in Next Generation. And they apparently do a lot of Star Trek theme stuff on their show, and they appeared in it. So it's kind of interesting to see them. I also found it interesting that they actually brought people like John Tesh on talking about Star Trek. I didn't know he was in Star Trek. So that was interesting seeing John Tesh mentioning how he played a Klingon.
Yeah.
Because he had one of those pain sticks, So he had to basically stab Worf so he could scream.
I had to watch that a few times in order to pick out which Klingon it was. I finally got it, so...
Did they show his chin line? Because that's kind of...
Yeah, that's how you had to go by, was that, with all the makeup and everything, you almost couldn't recognize him because he wasn't on the screen for very long in that close-up, so...
well, it's like I said, people used to say, "Oh yeah, Mick Fleetwood's in it. Do you recognize him?" Well, he's a fish.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Yeah, but he was so buried in makeup, you wouldn't even pick which fish it was.
It was that Antedian guy. It's like, how do I recognize Mick Fleetwood in that?
Yeah. Yeah, we're supposed to know. You could say anybody was in that outfit.
It could have been anybody.
Yeah.
I just feel, do you recognize him? No, I do not recognize him. He doesn't only look like a fish. Well, he's tall. Yeah, a lot of people are tall. That could be any tall actor.
I mean, they look like twins. The fish look like twins. I mean, how are you supposed to pick which
Yeah,
one?
they didn't make any of the fish look, especially like McFleetwood.
Yeah.
None of the fish ever had a ponytail.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was no identification with him.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, he's just a guy in a costume.
Yeah.
So with John Cash, there was some facial features left of his, so you could kind of see.
Yeah.
You know, it was the chin because he has that big square chin, so I recognized the chin line. But like I said, they show those Klingons so briefly because they're holographic Klingons, so they're not real. So. But that's the thing about human. I mean, it's like on Voyager when they had the Rock on. You were supposed to know he was the Rock, you know.
Well, yeah, it was pretty obvious. They didn't even try to hide any of the features at all of him. I mean, even had the eyebrows. I mean, you had to be pretty unknowledgeable about anything wrestling if you saw that and didn't even connect that.
We're in the series wasn't even on yet when this 25th anniversary airs.
I know it.
Sorry, we're in later, so we're in the 30th anniversary. I'm not going to talk about that one. The 25th anniversary is way better to me. But anyway, so yeah, I want to get to another funny scene because it's such a Shatner thing. They get to Star Trek V, and Leonard Nimoy talked about it for about 3 seconds. Like 3 seconds, and trying to get over that movie. They were going on and on about 4 and how he was inspired by Greenpeace, and how in 3, Shatner was talking about how there was a lot of espionage for the first 2 movies. And when they did Star Trek 3, they had to have the actors wear special ID badges and code the scripts and all kinds of special chemicals because people were stealing things. I didn't know that either. I didn't know there was so much trouble with espionage at that point. When they get to Star Trek V, Spock describes it as William Shatner taking the reins of the film to scale new heights of adventure, and that's about it.
You literally scale new heights.
and then they show him falling off a mountain.
Yeah.
In that beginning scene. And then Shatner said something I just find hilarious when Shatner said this. He goes, oh, the mountain climbing scene to me was a metaphor for man's ability to scale great heights.
Yeah.
So he's making this into this huge scene where he just really wanted to be on a cliff. I think that was...
But it didn't come off that way. It came off as him showing off. That's the way I saw it.
He just wanted to be on a cliff and be Shatner. It wasn't... I don't think there was any great majesty to it.
Yeah.
Even when Spock asks him what's the climbing, he says, oh, because it's there.
Yeah. I
There's
mean,
no great majesty to this.
Yeah, and then what also took away from it was McCoy's reaction to what he was doing. Are you nuts? He's like, you're trying to kill yourself.
Yeah, Bones was like, oh, be responsible playing games with life. And he's like, you should have been killed. You fell off that macho mind of yours.
Yeah.
He's giving him a lecture at the end. Like, it was dumb.
So any connection to something that Shatner said in that thing
that wasn't that deep. I mean, I think Shatner was trying to say, yeah, that was all cool. It was all cool. He was like,
well, he's trying to resell the movie, even though it kind of flopped.
And I just get a kick out how Nimoy's looking at him like, he's funning on him like, oh, Shatner, you are tripping.
Yeah.
You are tripping on yourself right now. But Nimoy's making a big joke of like, yeah. I mean, everybody says, yeah, you're the better director, Nimoy. He's screwed it up. So it's like, let's get to 6 now. That was the whole thing.
He had no business behind the camera there.
Right. So they like, let's get to Star Trek 5 really quick. They did less on Star Trek 5 than we did. I mean, they just talked about the mountain climbing scene. They didn't mention anything else. I didn't even see Lawrence Luckinbill on there or anything.
Yeah, they really didn't. Yeah, I mean.
So anyway, they went to Star Trek 6. They interviewed Iman, who gave an interesting analyzation of her character, the shapeshifter Markia. She described her as a good girl who's a villain. Interesting description, because we didn't know anything about the character except that she was working with the conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing good about her. I don't know where she got the good girl thing, because at the end we find out she was manipulating them the whole time.
Right, so she was the villain.
Yeah.
So, but I think she was kind of like, she starts out acting like a good person.
Yeah, but from the very beginning, she was trying to...
But it's all a deception.
Yeah, it was all stuff. She was suckering them in so she could get them, set cornered where they get killed by the Klingons. I mean, that was our whole thing, I
think the movie hadn't come out yet. So like, well, I want to sell this character that you're going to think she's good, but she's a villain.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what she meant. Like, she starts off seeming to be a good person, but then she's a villain.
Yeah.
So that's probably what she meant. Like, you're going to think she's a good girl, but she's not.
Yeah.
But if she said she was the saving them, she'd give away the movie. Because you mentioned in the Star Trek 6 preview, a scene which they didn't actually use the way they used it in the preview in the movie. It almost implied that Kirk got vaporized.
Yeah, they show it like
it's Kirk. They don't show the context of it.
And I swear that when they show it, where in the commercial, where they show him disintegrating, that scene was shot individually just for the commercial, because that's not the way it played out.
Exactly, because in the other one, in the movie, he's holding his hands up.
Yeah.
And in the other one, he's just looking up.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different scene. I think it was shot.
Yeah, they deliberately
I remember that.
Yeah.
Because in the movie, he's like, oh, but in the other one, he's like,
Yeah, it was just to fool the audience here, you know.
Yeah, it was a totally different version of the. They do that in movie trailers. They'll film these weird versions of scenes for the trailer, and then you won't see it in the film.
Yeah.
On a couple occasions,
it might have been the original way they filmed it, and they cut it and they refilmed it, you know, because maybe it wasn't good enough or something.
Because it looked at the preview like Kirk was going to get killed in that movie.
Yeah, it did.
But it wasn't. But
Yeah.
You told me you thought that was what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, you know, in the club there thought the same thing, that, you know, this was going to be his, you know, swan song, and he'll die, and that'll be the end of it.
And there would have been no other movie after that, would there?
Yeah.
But anyway, so Star Trek.
You know how many a character can die in Star Trek and then still come back. I mean, we saw that with Spock.
Well, I guess it's superhero death in Star Trek then, isn't there?
I mean, yeah, because time travel and everything else, I mean, who knows? I mean, you can come up with all kinds of ways here to figure that out. Yeah.
Because you mentioned about Star Trek 3, how Talar there was saying that, well, we've never done this before. They're all set up for it, you know?
Yeah.
Like they were trying to troll the humans or something.
Yeah,
like,
they're all
set up for
it. Robes and everything. They had all the accoutrements they needed.
Yeah, you're right. That is kind of weird. It's like, so we haven't done this before, but yeah, we're all set up. In case like, you certainly knew a lot about this thing you didn't know would work, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there was no debate. I mean, they just, okay, we'll do it now, you know, just...
I mean, you didn't see him scuttling around getting the robes on and everything. Like, okay, get your robes and get your stuff out and get your statue.
That Sarek at that time didn't even ask before the crew got there. I mean, he had no okay, right? So
they were all set up when they got there.
Yeah, I mean, they went through all this thing and they still didn't get an okay from Vulcan yet, so they didn't even know if they even got Spock, whether or not they were actually going to do anything. But when they got there, they was giving them the song and dance. Oh, we never did this before. But behind us,
they had it all set up.
Yeah, it's all set up behind us.
Oh well, Vulcan trolling, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, I never thought of it that way before. But it's like they're saying, "Oh, this has been more ritual or folk tales." Like, well, how come everything's all set up?
Yeah.
Anyway, let they just have that there in case, you know.
Yeah.
In case we need to refuse a body with a Katra, we'll just have the stuff set up in case we need to do it, you know, for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the thing about the anniversary special is that, yeah, they went right to 6, and it was really good seeing the makeup crew and how they did that, and you know, it was interesting to see people involved there, like Nicholas Meyer and Denny Martin Flynn talking about their perceptions of the film. And one thing that Michael Okuda said, and I found was really interesting, is that he said, when we do Star Trek, because he was using an old Mac to do the LCARS.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think you could use a now 25-year-old Mac to make LCARS. And I don't even know how to make LCARS on mine, and that's 25 years ago.
Yeah.
It must be a real breeze if you know how to do it. I mean, I'll use Windows Paintbox for it.
Yeah.
Because he was acting like, oh, this is a super advanced thing on my Mac, you know. But it must be. I just got to figure out. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I know people who make LCARs all the time. But anyway, the thing is that he was talking about something from season 5, was like a little blue thing they were using. But he said that the challenge of doing Next Generation at that time was we have to make it look like it's in the future, but use present day technology.
Yeah.
And that kind of brought to my head, well, you know what? If people think TOS looks weird and primitive, that kind of explains why it does. They're trying to look futuristic with the technology of the 60s.
Yeah.
And if you think about the technology of the 60s, it makes a little more sense.
Yeah. But here's the thing, though, and I've heard it said before, that even today, you look at TOS, and even though the stuff that they used back then was period specific in the 60s, it still looks advanced. You know, it still has that sleekness to it, where the controls, or just laid out in a certain way.
You're
And
right. And it's funny. The computers we're on now that I think about it, these computers don't need to be designed the way they are, really.
That's right.
And the thing is, they're all designed to look like 19th and early 20th century typewriters.
Yeah. And then, I mean, look at the special effects in the first movie. I mean, any of that, that's all 70s technology they put together, but yet that still looks futuristic. So
Right.
what's the point? What's the point of thinking about stuff
like, oh, well, we're so much more advanced now. Really kind of not. I mean, if you look at our computers, do you need to have them set up like a typewriter, per se?
Yeah.
You could have a flat numeric console for that now. They have that technology. I've seen things like that.
Yeah.
On touchpads, you don't need to have the physical things. That's just to identify with people who are used to older technology.
Yeah.
I've heard people who make computers say you don't need to have those physical keyboards.
Hmm.
We have ones that will work really well now. I mean, you could do a totally like an LCARS thing. I mean, but people identify for some reason, and when he said that, it reminded me of, people identify with kind of older things sometimes, don't they?
Yeah.
Well,
it's the practicality of the things that we make. I mean, it's like, remember I was telling you about the hand phaser, that we saw in Star Trek Next Generation, how tiny it was and looked like a phaser beam was just coming out of
like the little cricket.
Yeah. And I was saying, the problem with that is it wasn't a practical thing. A human being is not going to hold something that small, okay, and use it like that. It doesn't make sense. It's not practical. They're going to hold something that's still it's going to be big. You're going to still see it, okay, but it's going to be larger so that it's comfortable in the hand.
With those cricket phasers,
with keyboards and stuff like that, we have fingers to do these controls. So how advanced the thing's going to get where we don't use our fingers and stuff like that? If you're on a spaceship, you're going to have to use your fingers.
Even Star Trek have your finger. I'm just saying those physical pads are like a typewriter we use in our computer. Are based in 100-year-old technology. Just like
I mean, things will advance, but they won't go so far off the beaten path where it cannot connect. Well, we can't use it physically. You know what I'm saying? It's going to have to be something we could do. It's like when a person has got 2 legs, 2 arms, everything's got to be set up so we can walk to things, that we can operate equipment, that we can do things with our hands and our feet, because that's how we're made. It's just
right. We're not disembodied heads that float around in little.
That's right.
We're not an episode of Futurama or anything.
That's right. So you can only go so far with that, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is how far are you trying to push the envelope where it becomes unrealistic, where people aren't going to use stuff
like I said, that's why it kind of makes sense that, they have flat screens, but it still has to be touched by somebody.
Yeah. Because
there was a book I read about computers where they had this joke that Roxana Troy made about Betazoid computers being so advanced you can just think a command. Now, see, that might work for a Betazoid, but it wouldn't work well for a human because they're not telepathic, number one. And Betazoids are humanoid, but they may be of another sort. But human beings need to touch things.
And even if humans had that, they would still have to wear something mechanical, maybe, in order for that to work. You know what I'm saying?
Like a Bluetooth kind of device.
Yeah, some kind of, something connected. It's like with that book, the book version of the motion picture, where Kirk had something in his mind to give him the image of what that probe was.
Did he have an implant or something that did that?
Yeah, they just fed him the data as he, it's kind of put him in a daydream kind of state where he's just, seeing this play out.
Like in TOS, they had to, when they did, remember they had those subcutaneous transponders?
Yes.
They had to inject it with them. Yeah. They didn't just medically have it in them. They had to inject it.
Yeah.
Like a bug.
Yeah.
So it was an outside thing. Humans need external stuff. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Okuda's statement really made a lot of sense to Star Trek, that you needed to have some human connection in some way.
Yeah.
Whether it be the eyes or the hands. But it just reminded me of this attitude we have today, where everybody kind of, like the Urban Outfitter syndrome,
Yeah.
Where everybody is kind of obsessed with this idea of everything relating to them being about 12 or 13.
Yeah.
So, just things they remember.
Yeah.
Like, I was joking with my mother, she's saying, "Oh, I miss typewriters." You do?
I don't miss my old Smith Corona.
I mean they ran out of ink.
Yeah, I mean, ribbons and ink and geez, I mean, it's just.
and they had that TOS computer sound.
Yeah, the neighbors would get mad. They'd hear it up, downstairs. They could hear.
I know. I've been there, so it's like, that's romanticizing the past there, because those were not. I was remembering that I would love a word processor that was quiet, but they were, high then. So now everything's like. See, I couldn't do what I'm doing with you now or tap. This panel if it was a typewriter.
Yeah. And to me, I mean, I've gone to a computer now to write my stories and stuff like that. And I don't feel any different about using that over a typewriter.
Yeah, it's nostalgia. It's
Yeah.
romanticism of an event.
You're right. That's what it is. It's just people are used to seeing the same
And it's
thing.
based on emotion. It isn't a logical thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just have a little Vulcan moment in there. Now, I noticed another thing about this special that Spock, here I go doing that.
Yeah.
Boy, because this is the point. He was saying that he was talking about his struggle with the character of Spock, and that people actually threw a greeting him in '91 on the street as Spock.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that maybe they're not acknowledging Leonard Nimoy, the actor, but a character whose logical ideas about the universe around him interest them. So I think Nimoy, here's my thing about that. It showed you by then what a good, solid ground Nimoy already had on that character. Of course, I don't think he ever had a bad grasp on it. I think he was concerned that it would lose him opportunities, but I think any actor would.
I wish I could have just sat and kind of explained, at least my idea of why that was happening. And it wasn't because people were just, stereotyping him as Spock. It's that when people meet somebody famous, it's like their brain has a brain fart and they can't remember the person's name. You know what I'm saying? And
right. He didn't seem upset by it. He's like, I understand that that's who they see when they look at me.
Yeah, they know who you are.
They recognize him as Spock.
They're just shocked, like, oh my God, it's Spock. But they know his name is Leonard Nimoy. But they're gonna go, oh, Spock. But it's not that they're trying to say that he is Spock. They're just trying to bring out some kind of a gratitude that they met this guy, and everything. And it's just.
I gotta tell you, it's still better than I get a life speech.
I've seen it happen in so many conventions, where they meet somebody, an actor, and they just they forget the name and they fumble, and when they can't.
People identify this.
Yeah.
Like, I remember years ago when I was with my grandmother one day, I used to like to watch the Brady Bunch when I was younger, and we'd have that housekeeper come on, Alice, because my grandmother grew up in the 50s. She'd point out and say, "There's Schulze."
Yeah.
I'd say, "Who's Schulze?" And she'd explain to me that she was on another show called Schulze.
Yeah.
Which is like way before my time, so. No, that's Schulze. I'm like, no, that's Alice. No, that's Schulze. She was in Schulze. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. That was way before Brady Bunch, but
yeah,
like that's you identify her as that character.
Yeah.
Same with Leonard Nimoy. I mean, they know Leonard Nimoy's been in other things. He's done other things, but what's his most famous character to most people? And like I said, he reconciled that pretty well.
That's the thing about William Shatner, though, over the years is he's kind of separated himself from the character of Captain Kirk.
He's become William Shatner.
He's become William Shatner. So now when people see him, they know he's William Shatner now. They don't confuse him now with Captain Kirk or anything like that. They know he played Captain Kirk, but they see him as William Shatner.
But look all the stuff he had to do to get there.
I know. It took years and years for him to
separate. That, and he had to kind of be ridiculous to do that.
Yeah. He's been in a lot of different shows.
Where Leonard Nimoy was always very elegant, had a big dignity about him, and to be quite honest, had a lot of Spock-like mannerisms.
He does.
That was emotional. And even he mentioned in that Netflix docu that he kind of put some of himself in Spock, some of his practicality, his logic.
Yeah.
Although hyped it up, because obviously Leonard Nimoy was a human who has definite emotions, but he kind of just hyped up the attitude. I mean, but I'm just thinking if Shatner did that with Kirk.
Well, if we saw Leonard Nimoy act in other things, a lot of other things other than Star Trek over the years after, it was done, I don't really remember too many other things. Before he was Spock, I saw him in some things, but after that, I don't remember seeing him in a lot of other TV shows or doing his own thing like Shatner did.
He was in, as a really young guy, he was in some sci-fi movie. I can't remember what the name of it was.
Well, he was in the Twilight Zone. I know that.
He was in Twilight Zone.
Yeah. But after he did his thing in Star Trek, he kind of just dropped off the map, sort of, and we didn't really see him during the 70s. Yeah,
he did some theater and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I think that's the reason why people really have a hard time separating, Leonard Nimoy from Spock, because they didn't have that experience where we got with Shatner, where we saw him in different TV shows and doing all these different things.
We do 3 or 4 podcasts long, a 5-hour review of the attitude people have about TV versus the theater.
Yeah.
That has gone on for 100 years and that's its own little world.
It is.
It was with motion pictures. It was with TV. It is with streaming now. The theater is its own little side thing. And even Nimoy admitted that that's its own little world over there. It's kind of like that. You think that thing about Ricardo Montalban. The theater is a medium where your head's on high.
Yeah, it is a different world because when you're on stage, you don't get redos.
Nope. That's like that. That's the big dramatic challenge.
Yeah, you got to do it perfect. You got to nail it every time.
It's got its head way up in the air because it knows it can.
And I think that's the thing. Patrick Stewart, when he did Star Trek Next Generation, the first season, he was trying to approach it as a in that theater kind of manner. He was trying to nail it every time.
You bring Seward's part, because there's a scene where I think it's from the Next Generation Entertainment Tonight special from the look of it. He's sitting on the battle bridge saying he watched some Star Trek in the 70s and 60s, which he admitted to doing that. But he said, I had no concept of what an icon this was. I didn't know this was such a big deal.
Yeah.
He kind of considered Shakespeare to be the ultimate thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean.
But he realized people see Star Trek as a sort of Shakespearean thing.
Yeah.
Like, this is something operatic, and even Harv Bennett called it a space opera. And that's one thing about the 25th anniversary in general. It's very, 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 very respectful towards Star Trek. Not reverent. It points out some issues, but it is respectful and treats it like a literary form.
Yeah.
You don't, should I get to my basic point or wait till the end? Because there's a big point about this show that I just kept getting in my head.
Okay.
But I don't want to say the end part and then not have a big climax. So I'll keep going with it. I've been talking a lot, but is there anything else that stuck out in your mind with any of the show that just stuck right out at you?
Well, I like how, like I said at the end, they kind of went to where they were trying to sell Next Generation a little bit, because that was, talking about that, a little bit, and of course, like you said, they were going to do the part with Spock and as a guest star on Next Generation. So
Or they're getting ready to do unification.
Yeah. So they were kind of, they were also they were selling a little bit on that too at the end. It seemed to me like those were two separate things, because as the TOS Star Trek got its inspiration from Gene Roddenberry, from his reflection of early science fiction, Star Trek The Next Generation kind of took its inspiration from TOS, and to make another Star Trek series. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of a different beginning for them, how they had to draw from the fandom that was already there to get them to watch The Next Generation. And I remember when it first started, there was a lot of people that were really adamant about not watching it because it wasn't Kirk, it wasn't Spock, it wasn't McCoy. You know
what? You almost said the very first part of our Star Trek The Next Generation general podcast right there. The point is that if it isn't Kirk, if it isn't Bones, if it isn't Spock, it's not Star Trek.
That's right.
That was, everybody over 30 at that time seemed to have that attitude. We just ruined that whole podcast for ourselves.
No,
that's the major thing of it.
Yeah,
but that's without that group.
That was the attitude at the time of 1987. Was that
that's the characters. That was I
mean, at first they thought, the original cast is going to come back and do another series. They said, no, we're going to have all new actors. And they went, huh? And then I remember when they had the pictures of the actors that they were going to put in these roles. Everybody's like, what is it? They none of these people. I don't know any of these people except Patrick Stewart because I saw him in Dune. But they didn't know any of these actors, and they said, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. They were already making their judgments just by looking at the faces of these actors. I mean, it was really unfair.
But I think with the Next Generation, because they did talk about the Next Generation, that and they gave that a lot of respect. But of course, by season 4, the Next Generation was huge.
Yeah,
I just remember season 4 as being a major thing.
Yeah,
and Gaze McFadden brought up another point that she thought Star Trek was a good show about having role models for children.
Yeah,
I was one of those kids because, like I said, people have their sports stars. Picard and Riker and all them were the role models I had.
Yeah.
The diplomats, the people who were intelligent. Picard couldn't fight with his hands worth anything, but boy, could he hold a meeting.
Yeah.
Not that I'm going to hold up and hold a lot of meetings with people. I wasn't thinking like that, but I was thinking that I'm going to use my head to get out of it. I'm going to be the smart guy.
What's nice about Picard is he didn't have to give a speech in every meeting. Like when Kirk would have a meeting, he always had this big scene.
This is our business.
Yeah, he would have a line there that was all about how he was going to convince everybody that he was right. And
there are 430 people on this ship.
Yeah, Picard, he wasn't that person that would stand up and just give a podium speech to the staff after.
Would listen and then offer wisdom and say, basically, well, here's your idea. Discuss.
Yeah,
he was sort of the mediator rather than the arbiter.
Yeah, you'd like, let's get some feedback. What do you think? What do you think? You know, that's what he'd be doing.
He could be an epic troll for sure. I mean, if you were emotionally unstable type, he could get right to that core by just saying just the right words.
Yeah.
Like, look what he did with that Admiral Sati. He knew he was sensitive about her father, and he knew how to get to that point and make her realize her mistake.
Yeah.
He was good at that. Without being cruel, he was good at knowing where to get to that spot to make you realize you were doing right or wrong.
Yeah.
Which is actually an expert ability of negotiation.
Yeah.
And speaking of Picard, I remember when my mother was one of those Kirk forever, Picard never people in the beginning, because she thought he was a bore that started out. But by 2000, by 91 when that came, I was like, Kirk's an old guy. Picard all the way, all into it. Really, but Picard by season 4 found his own. I mean, for one thing, he'd been assimilated by the Borg. His humanity, if anything, grew larger after that.
Yeah.
He worked very hard to get human and understand humanity, and became closer to situations, and you saw him just growing as a character a lot in that 4th season.
Well, I figured in season 3, when season 3 started, I thought I could see a lot more effort.
Yeah, he was starting to change then, but after that Borg thing, he really started to change.
Yeah, because it seemed like after everything we saw in that season, it was at risk of him not coming back. Like,
right, it was like they were going to fire on him, he was going to go away or something.
Yeah, and it was everybody's biggest concern. Are we going to be losing the main character, or it's like people still wanted to see more Picard, because they were kind of getting to like him in season 3, because there was a lot of good episodes in that season.
Right, season 3 was when Next Generation started to find its own footing, and
that's right,
started to do really well. And then when they ended, it's like this big whopper of a cliffhanger. Where it's like, what's going to happen now? Is he going to die? Is he going to get killed? Is his first officer going to kill him?
That's right.
Came back in season 4, and when she mentioned role models, I remember season 4 was the year that the Next Generation really aimed itself at families.
Yeah.
It did a lot of stories about, Kalar was in that, and Worf's parents came on the ship. So it became the closest thing Star Trek had. Now, I know that some snide people refer to that as an after-school special show. I don't. I mean, Star Trek was never that single-issue cause. It was always Star Trek. It had its universe. It had its aliens. But the Next Generation, they had that big ship with all these families on. You could bring people on. And so you saw these people had real lives, real families, real people they were involved with.
What was wrong with the after-school specials? There's a lot of actors that began from there, and they're big actors today.
I know, but like I said, that's going to get to my last point, because my last point is the big point.
Yeah, I mean, I used to like watching those things after, they weren't long.
So did I. Although I was usually asked to watch them, but some of them brought up things that were actually kind of Star Trek-y.
Canada was ahead of the ball on us, because they were dealing with those issues on the regular TV shows, and we're just touching them over in the States at the same time. Because I remember, watching shows on PBS that were being filmed in Canada, and they were dealing with stuff that we wouldn't even talk about on television.
Exactly. And, it's funny you mentioned that, because Gates McFadden spoke of the young audience very respectfully. She's like, oh, well, I think children need positive role models. And I'm thinking, that got me to thinking, how you often hear, I don't know if I've heard it a lot, but you ever hear a person say, oh, well, this or that is a kiddie show because they have to have a message in it, implying that these messages are only for children. Now, if you ask me, seeing some of the adults around me, I think adults need more messages in a lot of ways.
You're right.
Children are messages not for children. Sometimes you need to reinforce into your 40s to get the point, Yeah, it's like, adults don't need dumb stuff. No, adults don't need dumb stuff. They need to keep their minds stimulated.
Yeah. Learn.
Don't just say, oh, you're 40, just watch whatever dumb show you want. No.
Yeah.
Don't just lower the standard because somebody's old, because that says that you've learned everything that's learnable.
Yeah.
And that isn't the case. Humans are always learning and evolving. So, yeah, give children basic messages like play fair, but advanced messages as somebody gets older. And that's what the good thing about after-school specials, I think, were. I don't want to get too far into that because that's another whole story. But anyway, they were more geared for teenagers and young adults. So they just took the messages from childhood and broadened them out a little bit.
Yeah.
And, I know a lot of young people resent them because it was like, oh, they're trying to spread sunshine into us too much, and life is messed up. But again, it's like Next Generation. That's based on emotion. That's based on trauma. That isn't based on reality.
Yeah.
Whether you know it or not, maybe that after-school special influenced you. You just don't want to let it happen.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I do think the Next Generation, if it is an after-school special, hey, it was on Sunday night to me, so it wasn't. But
Really, I challenge anybody to show me an episode that was throwing out a negative message to a child, or a child seeing something that wasn't, enlightening in some way.
Which again, this is all going to my last point. I want to save that till point I've got. I want to make sure it's right. But yeah, seriously, no, you're right. I agree with Gates that especially now TOS. I know it had a good young audience inspired, but TOS was always more like seasoned people. They were like people who kind of knew their stuff and were out there doing their thing. With TNG, yeah, I know, Naked Now. I don't. It's gonna be some other thing, but in the end of the day. We'll save that for Wesley, okay? I want to do a Wesley profile at some point, so I'll save a lot of stuff for his stuff, because there's a lot of points I got to make about him, too. But the fact they had children on the ship, and they had people with families. There was an episode in season 4, I remember, where there were 2 kids whose parents were gone for some reason, and Riker had to look after them.
That's right, yeah.
And one almost killed the other. And that's when Data met Dr. Sung.
Yep.
You kind of saw family conflicts on the ship in the middle of Starfleet stuff. Yeah. So, it sort of gave you this community in space thing. The Gene Roddenberry probably may have wanted to do in the 60s, but couldn't due to budget.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we know? He might have wanted to put families on the Connie. I don't know. But he couldn't. It would have been too much. It would have been too new a concept. But because he always talked about the idea of families in space and the spaceship Earth idea.
Yeah. And the thing with TOS is they really couldn't talk too much about family issues on that because they didn't have any children on that ship.
Right. But like I said, who knows? Maybe Roddenberry wanted it then, but they said, well, we don't have a demographic for the show yet. So, I mean, TV sci-fi was in its infancy as it was. There wasn't an articulation for it, and this was a new show.
Yeah.
I think when Roddenberry did Next Generation, he really wanted to push that family angle.
Yeah.
And by season 4, they had that. So that kind of reminded me of where I was then.
Yeah.
A young person who didn't see a baseball player or the pop star of the week as my hero. It was the guys on Star Trek.
Yeah.
They were the hero characters, and as they call them now in Trek Yards. Hi, Stuart. They call them the hero. That was the first time I ever heard that term, the hero ships or the hero characters.
Yeah.
Oh, I forget to mention Marvel. See, I wasn't reading comics either, so and that's another thing. The Marvel heroes are always larger than life characters. In Star Trek, they're heroes, but they're human heroes.
Yeah.
It's not that they're all flawed and being obnoxious. It's just that they're capable of making some mistakes.
Yeah.
But they try not to. They try to evolve and do better.
Yeah.
So if you see a person who's capable of making mistakes, but they try not to, that's inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
That a person who can make mistakes don't make them. What did Kirk say in the Taste of Armageddon? That's all it takes sometimes. We're not going to kill today. Basically, as simplified as that may be, just the idea of a human not being obnoxious today.
Yeah.
And that was heroic to me. It's like, we don't have to be that way. We can be this way, just the other side of the coin you could deal with.
Yeah.
And so it just, I'm getting back to that point. I have this last point that I hope it comes out as well as it's in my head, You ever had that moment where you have a thought in your head and it comes out all?
Yeah, well, in my case, I'm just worried I'd forget that thought and I wouldn't say it.
Right, I just don't want to get to the end first, but
yeah.
I think at this point I've been running on and on. Is there any other point that in this area that you wanted to mention that maybe I...
No, I mean, I think that the 25th anniversary special was probably one of the better ones.
It was so respectful. I mean, it didn't, I'm sure Harlan Ellison, R.I.P., until everybody else gets there. But anyway, the thing is that with Harlan Ellison, he might have said, oh, that was all about hero worshiping Gene Roddenberry and his product selling and all that stuff. But anyway.
Yeah. It all depends on how a person looks at it. And apparently he sees it his way. And
well, yeah, we know what his way is. It's like he has daggers for Gene. We knew that, but over this little writing thing. But anyway, that might be another podcast. We can objectify that a little more because that doesn't get into objective territory because the subject matter is not objective.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that I'm talking about Allison here. But anyway, he's the most objective character in Star Trek to me anyway. So just as a person, he was very subjective. At least it seemed that way. But anyway, no, with Gene Roddenberry, it sort of shows you what he created, and you get the impression that a lot of these people who were involved in the Star Trek, even then, were better people for it. That Patrick Stewart said that it really helped him out a lot to understand And even in that show, The Captains, which we should probably review on sometimes, but it kind of got him out of that theater snobbery. You know, TV, but, coming into this thing and saying, oh, I can bring Shakespeare into this as a literary form, and, I can have Dade over here doing Dickens, we can bring this, and they did shows about Apollo back in TOS, and we can bring a theatrical sense of this show. It has the door for that. And that was the unique thing. They brought on Sherlock Holmes they couldn't use much of. I really want to research that Sherlock Holmes thing a little bit more, why that couldn't be installed. I never got that whole thing.
Yeah, I know. It's a whole different...
They used it, but they didn't... The whole idea was they couldn't use an original Holmes story because Data would know it, so they created a whole new thing, but they didn't want him to use it. So it's like, okay, so they not license the characters or what? Because it was a whole new story. It wasn't related to Conan Doyle at all.
Yeah.
But they used the characters. I don't know if there was a licensing issue or...
Yeah, I don't know.
But, they couldn't use Sherlock Holmes that much. So, wish they could have, because that would have been interesting to have them develop these original stories based on it. I mean, I don't wasn't Nicholas Meyer really into that?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, obviously in the dialogue you could hear it, but, kind of harkening back to some of the old classics.
Okay, so we're going to backtrack a little bit here because this is toward the end of the docu, okay? We have Star Trek 6, which they talk about the makeup. They interview Nick Meyer a lot, who had a magisterial sense as a director, but I'm never going to give Nick Meyer lack of credit for not being well-spoken. That guy can talk a serious game. And, maybe that's the whole thing about Nick Meyer. He speaks in the most magisterial way about just about everything he does. He seems to love the idea of pageantry and majesty. The explosions have to be bigger, the ship has to be darker, the uniforms have to be more intense. He loves intensity. You can see that in the way he is. But boy, does he know how to talk. I mean, his way with words, in a lot of ways, kind of outs Roddenberry a little bit. I mean, Roddenberry seems like almost like a background guy when he talks. I don't know if you've noticed that. He seems like a producer in the background.
Yeah.
He doesn't always sound like the guy who created Star Trek. He's rather casual.
Yeah.
But then again, like you said, he had a lawyer, so maybe he did all that work. I don't know. Yeah. He never came off like a guy who would be personally very shark-like.
Yeah.
Where you could see with the guy like Meyer, you might say, well, I don't like this, and Meyer might explain to you in the most succinct terms why it had to be that way and only have to say it once. That's the impression I got of Meyer, that he, whether he liked it or not, he knew what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Some people just like that. Roddenberry...
That's every director's prerogative. I just don't happen to agree with the way he approached...
Well, I'm just talking about Nicholas Meyer's character as a human being, that he seems to know exactly what he wants. I don't always like what he wants, but he seems to know it. It's not... I don't think Meyer was ignorant to what he wanted.
No, he wasn't. He got what he wanted, pretty much.
Like you said, he even fought with Roddenberry, but I don't think it was a long one. I think he kind of seemed to know how to say it once.
Yeah.
I think Roddenberry had a bit of a compromiser in him. I mean, he knew what he wanted to do, but there was a little bit there where he felt like a producer, like, well, maybe this could work, but it has to use in this. Because Roddenberry had a world he wanted to keep.
Well, you see, that's the impression I got with, when I listen to these stories that I hear from people about the conflicts they had with Gene Roddenberry, is a lot of times people seem to forget that Star Trek was his creation from the get-go.
Right, it was
okay.
His...
I understand these other people getting on the ship late have things they want to put into it, and that's fine, but you still have to consult with the creator.
Right, exactly, because
and when they don't get what they want, like what Meyer, when he didn't get what he wanted, he would storm out of Gene's office and he would complain, I don't, and it just, he didn't want to work with Roddenberry anymore after that. And it's just like, well, look, you can't be that way. This is not your Star Trek. This is Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek. If you want to do your own science fiction, then you can be like that. You can be stubborn.
That Meyer had a big personality, and
he did. Yeah.
You could see that Roddenberry was more like, I could never tell if he was more of a background guy or if he was so involved in Star Trek that he didn't need to be that intense.
I think he wanted to make sure that his vision, his environment that he created, that world had to stay.
Well, you could tell he knew what this was supposed to be, because, I mean, obviously he had this vision in his head for what this world would be like.
Yeah.
How human beings would react or how they react to the world around them. And he seemed to have this idea with TOS that, well, there'd be conflict, but it would come from without.
I mean, we don't hear any stories about when Lucas created Star Wars. You don't hear about other directors saying, "Oh, no, let's do it like this." Like, there was never any conflict because
they almost got on their knees to him. It was
it just seemed like everybody just bent over backwards for him. But why was it with Roddenberry? Everybody that tried to work with him always ended up fighting with him over his idea. It's like people can't grasp the concept of a positive future. They want it to be a more darker, violent. They're in that pattern, that friggin' golden path that they think is going to get them the money they want. Instead of taking the risk.
Yeah, there's really bleak people.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I mean, maybe that darkness and that attitude will work with Star Wars, but it doesn't work with Star Trek. It's two different things. They're two different things. I mean, it's like you can't bring that same...
Like I said, Star Wars, again, is more absolute heroes, absolute villains.
Yes.
Very absolute kind of characters. With Star Trek, it's not there's a lack of clarity, but the villains...
more shades of gray.
Sort of, but the villains have different aspects to their villainy. They're not just like, we're just evil, get used to it. It's like, well, we have motive... That's one thing Gene Roddenberry said. Star Trek always had character and motivation. Mm-hmm. And, we discussed that in the Wrath of Khan thing, how in the Wrath of Khan, there wasn't much motivation in him except for the never use revenge idea. My sarcasm is a little lacking. You'll have to forgive me on that. But anyway, where in the original one, Khan had a definite background and character, and there was a lot to deal with there. His kind of superiority complex, him looking at human beings in the future as being inferior. Well, you've got technology, but you haven't changed as people.
Yeah.
That Khan was interesting. He wasn't just out to bite somebody's head off. He was kind of in... And, Ricardo mentioned that. When he was talking about Khan, he said, he felt the Khan in the Space Needle had a lot of composure.
Mm.
Again, a guy who knew what to say and knew how to say it once and knew how to get results.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember, he's like, we bought the world order, and everybody shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then later, he, of course, Montalban, you know how droll he could be with his...
That's right.
Like, I wanted to turn Khan into a man who built up a passion for vengeance for the woman he loved passionately. And he starts becoming that character, and I found it interesting how he was able to kind of slip, because the first Khan was kind of like him, kind of a little on high and arrogant and haughty, but in control of what he was doing.
Yeah.
Where the second one was like, I will avenge you, bury you alive, and just like, I don't care what I'm going to do. I'm just going to kill you all, And in other words, this guy who was kind of mad with passion, but still had that genetic superiority, but his emotions were blinding. He had the human frailty that he couldn't quite deal with.
That's right.
As superior as he was supposed to be, he ended up a flawed character who made really stupid mistakes in that battle, now that I think about it. Really stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
What does Spock call it? Two-dimensional thinking?
Yeah, because he wasn't used to fighting in outer space.
He was just fighting with tanks and guns on Earth, probably.
Yeah, because everything is on a flat, what's in front of you and what's behind you. But when you're in space, you got to think of what's above you and what's below you. And that's why he dropped the ship and let the Reliant pass overhead. Then he rolls it up and hit him from behind. Khan never thought of that because he never fought in that kind of environment before.
Right, he's thinking it's still very 20th century,
That's right.
It's still like very ground troop and stuff like that. But the funny thing about, seeing Montalban do it was how he almost acted out the two Khans right there.
Yeah.
Because, by the end, he's completely posturing because he's doing Wrath of Khan. But then when he's doing Space Seed Khan, he's more or less himself. It's like this kind of that guy, the fantasy, Mr. Rourke, basically.
But like you said,
running the joint.
That characterization of Khan was more interesting.
Right, because he was running the joint in his own life.
Because in 2, he was just a berserker kind of weapon. He was just out of control, and he had to be stopped. I mean, there was no dimension, there was no depth. We all knew why he was acting that way. It was just we didn't learn anything new about Khan in that movie. But
the 25th anniversary pointed out about the Star Trek villains that they were multidimensional. Well, for the most part, I think they kind of made the Klingons a little one-dimensional. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
How they just said, okay, well, Klingons will attach some violent name to everything they do, and that's going to be it. But even still, you saw the houses of Duras fighting, and you saw this multidimension within their race. And maybe that's why they didn't work with Romulans, because Romulans have the potential to be so multidimensional it could overwhelm them. This species were an offshoot of Vulcans. They had this very awkward history that we want to go there, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, they created these big villains and the Borg. I mean, can't get any bigger than that because they're all part of a collective until they formed a queen. But anyway, they had this big collective consciousness that was scarier before it had a manifestation.
Yeah.
So I noticed the only thing, they didn't really go into the Borg. They showed a little clips of them. And, speaking of clips, one thing about the 25th anniversary I find interesting is that there's a lot of points there where they're showing off a lot of the effects, because, okay, time to get to my end point.
Okay.
It's so good in my head. I'm telling you, so good in my head. It seems so right. Let me try to itemize this down as well as I can. Start with Leonard Nimoy's final point, because it's like, I realize this. He was saying that, a child can watch Star Trek for the action and the fun, and then come to it later in life and see something they may have missed. And he said, it's thoughtful science fiction. And he said, it's not just, somebody shoots the bad guy and whoever does that wins.
Yeah.
And a little light bulb popped up in my head. Here we are. What is Star Trek in 2018? What has it been for the past decade?
Yeah.
Not only that, we're here now talking about that. So I realized the 25th anniversary special and what I saw in it has framed every freaking thing we've done. Because we're people of that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That the whole vibe that expressed in the 25th anniversary show, that is why we're doing Trek Prime now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm greasing the wheels of the show a little bit, but we're getting a low subscriber rate. What can you do? But anyway. So anyway, we'll get to that part in the end. But I mean, if you look at it, I mean, I watched it from beginning to end, and I realized in the end, this is why we're doing this. Because to me, and I'm sure to you too, Star Trek is not that show where you just shoot the bad guy and whoever does so wins.
Yeah.
That's what makes it different from other shows. That sometimes, the villain gets, annihilated or whatever, or defeated, but it brings up points in the hero characters about things they could have done right or could have done wrong.
Yeah.
Somebody said it well once on a thing I was watching about Star Trek. The old show, Star Prime Universe now, I guess you'd call it. It was kind of funny, but it made sense. When you beam down to a planet on Star Trek, every planet contained a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's true. That there was always that moral derivative in Star Trek. And they spent a lot of time in the 25th anniversary special emphasizing just how important the messages were to Star Trek. They didn't say it was a gimmick. They didn't say it was a way to get audience numbers. They weren't talking about SJWs. Yeah. They were talking about how social messages were integral to Star Trek, and you could not have the show without it.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2018. So not only is that 25th anniversary special interesting in a nostalgic sense, but it really shows you how much has changed in the fundamental perception of Star Trek.
Yeah.
These people cared about this show. There was none of those people, even Nicholas Meyer, who had his own vision for it, you could tell he still cared about what the show was. There was still this caring, like, well, we can make it more action oriented, but it's still gotta have that humanity.
Yeah, character kind of thing with it.
There's still gotta be that message there somewhere. We can make the bridge dark, we can make them wear crappy uniforms, we can do all kinds of things we want, but there's still gotta be that thing that's core there.
Yeah.
We can only do so much the other way,
Yeah.
And that's the point. I hope I got that one right because I've been thinking it so much in my head. That's what the 25th anniversary left me with. Because you could almost take the next 25 years, go from the 25th anniversary, fast forward where we are now and say, where did things go off that track?
Yeah. Star
Trek worked. Is it turning into a Kirk speech here? Risk is our business. I was thinking that big Kirk speech, but it's worth it. It's okay. So I'm not as pragmatic as Shatner, but
I think, in the most simplistic explanation that I can think of is that the people that ran Paramount and Star Trek, they've retired, they're gone, and the new generation of people that are in there now are trying to make their bones. Basically they're trying to make their mark in movie history and television history. And instead of trying to create something unique for their generation and stuff like that, like every other generation before has come and gone, they're trying to take ideas that have been out there, recreate them, and put their label on it and say we did better. And a lot of times it doesn't work. I mean, and when it doesn't work, they scratch their head and they just say they don't understand, but they'll just say, well, it's just a lot of people, old people still watching it, and they don't understand where we're going with it or something, but they're not thinking.
You're getting back to my main point again, and it's a good point. I would even say go watch The Next Generation. Watch that later. But if you want to see, well, the old people don't watch Star Trek anymore, well, guess what? Go back and watch the 25th anniversary show. Then you'll see what's the thing that gets people interested in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to throw my Shatner here a little bit, but I'm going to do it. Star Trek's our business! That's why we do this podcast! Well, I got to admit it, and it was in season 3. That was a pretty good pragmatic speech, so I'll give it that. It was big, but,
But
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in.
As bad as season 3 was, they still had the same recipe.
Still, even as crazy as that was, that thing was still there in it.
Same recipe.
That was there. Even
there was always a message, even if the message was
silly. Even in Plato's Stepchildren, as weird as that was, that message was still present. They were still talking about how to overcome exploitation, human weakness and decadence. It was still there. You could have what, but it was still there. You could have. I mean, you couldn't remove it, and it's a pity now that they're starting to kind of remove it. And it's like, when you remove it,
all you got left is
Well, yeah, I mean, but basically at the end of the day, do you have Star Trek or do you have the decaying remains of it?
Yeah, it's just a shadow of what it was now. I mean,
it's like I've heard it said, you can put a lot of things now and just have a generic thing and just put a new title on, just have that title on it. And it's like, Star Trek isn't just a title, and this may sound like it's hero worship or idolatry, but
distinguish Star Wars from Star Trek these days. I mean, they both basically follow the same kind of, beat to beat, action, kill, slaughter, and all, like in the Abrams films. I mean, they're almost the same thing. It's just a different name.
And it bothers me how, I started transporting myself. They were going back in time and talking about Galileo and the Apollo astronauts. Yeah. I was transporting myself back to 1991, where, or late 80s, where in some segment of the world, it was kind of okay to think. There was a point where I knew people who were sports jocks who hated Star Trek, who were still doing money to save the whales. I don't see that anymore. Yeah. So it's not so much a nostalgia, but I said, okay, it's the past. Times change. But did people at one point just stop wanting to think? Did they stop wanting to be?
Maybe they ought to go back to the days when they used to censor the hell out of TV shows, where where people wanted to get a message out, but they had to find a different way.
Well, no, you're right. I am not in approval of censorship, but here's my thing. In a weird, screwed up kind of way, it forced people to write better. I don't know how it did, because, censorship. But here's the thing about censorship, though, and I wanted to bring this up. This is an addendum to the 25th anniversary. We discussed everything about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this out there because this is kind of redundant to that. The thing about censorship is that, when people started getting all these new freedoms, you get this attitude. People thought they should go out there and say, okay, let's all go out there and act like 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
It's like, and Star Trek always said this: freedom takes a level of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
A level of maturity. I mean, this is a subjective thing, but how many, what's the word for it? How many decent parents would give a 12-year-old absolute, total, uncensored freedom?
Yeah, really.
Because they haven't learned yet. Yeah. You go with age appropriateness, but when people aren't used to it, you kind of add it. And I think what happened with censorship is they got rid of it all very quickly, and all of a sudden, and now you see a world where people just want to swear all the time.
Yeah,
And
anything
it's like,
goes.
well, with all this unrestricted freedom, you could do so much more than you could in the 60s, but you just want to swear or just want to shoot people.
Yeah.
You could do so much more. You could tell much more political
Yeah, and
stories.
if one channel won't take it, we'll make our own channel and we'll just put it even worse. You know.
Okay, what happens is one person swears, one person, um, one person is doing this or whatever. That makes a lot of money, so somebody else does that because they want to make a lot of money. So they, everybody's swearing, and who cares about censorship anymore? And then you have people like us who, I don't know how you felt, who at one point detested censorship, wanting it back only so the writing will be better.
Yeah, it seemed like the shows from the earlier years were better and had more messages than they do today, because back then they had all those censors in place to keep things, reasonable.
and so, like I said, does that make us all of a sudden conservative though? No. It just I think what?
It's a way to motivate writers, I think.
I think it reminds us that, you need to kind of, it's like when you play the lottery. That's why they say please play responsibly.
Yeah.
But not that matters any, because people still go out and buy $100 worth of scratch tickets.
Yeah. What's responsible? It's very vague how they want to interpret that,
Right. But I mean, they just say that to cover themselves. But the point is that, so, like I said, if somebody asked me, do you want that old censorship stuff back? I would say, no, probably not. I just think people need to be responsible about it. Because, I think a lot of people out there who are creating right now don't always think in a very mature way,
Yeah, they don't. They don't want to.
Like I said, I mean, could you imagine if you told a 14-year-old, swear whenever you want, do whatever you want, they'd probably just do it.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of that now, but if you gave that kind of freedom to a responsible person, like a Roddenberry or a mature person, they'd probably know what to do with it. So I think it's a combination of personal maturity and the amount of they need to do that's causing it. I think what they need to do is put more, because if you looked at the old 25th anniversary show, all the people dealing with Star Trek are definitely grown adults.
Yeah.
I mean, they may not all be, 60, but they're definitely mature people.
Yeah.
You can tell they've lived and experienced. So if you give a person like that freedom to create and didn't censor them, they know what to do with it. They'd have the responsibility to do with it.
Yeah.
If you take a young, up-and-coming director or a producer with not a lot of experience, aside from being young, and you give them a lot of freedom all of a sudden, Animal House.
Yeah.
Because they're still in that mentality. And everybody knows they're youth-oriented.
The censorship sort of trained the writers to think on a different level in order to be better writers, to get with their messages. And maybe once they were released from that, they're still good at what they do. It's just the next generation behind them, now that those rules aren't there, they're not being trained how to be thoughtful.
Right. And the thing even there is that also the directors are starting a lot younger.
That's right.
They still kind of a younger sensibility. So you have the younger sensibility with the censorship taken away. They haven't quite learned the responsibility of what they have yet.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, take that same freedom and give it to a person who's more seasoned. They're gonna know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And they do. But like I said, it isn't all about the colorful metaphors in life.
Yeah.
Think about what those producers who were older could have done with the less censorship in the 60s. They wouldn't have had to have the 20th century brush wars.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have had the crew swear at each other all the time. Because a lot of times nowadays, the lack of censorship and the openness is often used just to be adolescent.
Yeah.
And you've got to move beyond that. And when I watched that 25th anniversary, that's my fundamental thought. This is very grown up. These people are very grown up and mature, and they know what they're doing, and they have a vision of life. And even though I'm 38, if I was given creative freedom at this point, I know what to do with it. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I would have the construct to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be, okay, I'm 14, no censorship. Let's all party and swear. I wouldn't. I know a lot of you out there who are 14 are also mature enough, so I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the ones that aren't. Just saying.
We're basically talking about the entertainment people in the business today. They're not of the same caliber that you and I remember growing up with.
There's a lot of things that could go into that. That's a big maelstrom right there, because the guy makes a lot of money. We'll give him whatever he wants.
It's just, and I know this is a little off topic, but this new Mary Poppins film that's coming out, I really ain't excited.
I haven't seen anything about it.
I don't know what they're gonna do with this.
And, I'm worried about it too, because Mary Poppins was definitely my childhood comfort food. I got to admit that.
I used to like that show. I mean, when I was,
I don't want to see. Here we go again with that statement. I think you know what's going on. I don't want to see Mary Poppins serve me on a trash can lid.
Yeah.
I don't want to see
that. You know, like, you know?
when he talks to the machine gun. Really.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to see that. I mean, you know,
I don't think they're going to do that, but I mean, now, okay, I get, even if Julie Andrews, Mary Poppins was a little bit snide. I get that. But in that elegant Victorian way, I don't want to see it turned up to her just being a rude teenager.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to see their, you know, like being brought down, the character brought down in order to.
Well, like I said, Mary Poppins could be a whole other conversation, but
like I'm just saying, as far as like what we're saying from the past, the way people did things,
right? Exactly.
The quality has diminished somewhat, you know, in a lot of the things that we're watching in movies and on TV, and that's the sad part of it is now Star Trek has to exist in this new world where we don't have the same level of talent out there that we used to have.
Exactly. And, you know, in the early 90s, I realized around 91, they were whittling away at censorship then anyway. But still, they had those older people more seasoned and knew what to do with that freedom.
Yeah.
Rather than, okay, here's some 18-year-old kid without much experience. Let's just get him whatever he wants.
Yeah.
You want explosions? You want that. You want TNA? You got that. You want that? You want colorful metaphors? You got that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's become mainstream now.
Yeah.
But, hey, you know, it's nothing new. I mean, I told you this before. I knew a lot of, wait a minute. Are we devolved into talking about Star Trek and just preaching to people? I don't want to.
I mean, it is. And, you know, when you talk about the 25th anniversary, that came out at a time when TV, I think, was at its height. There was a lot of talent out there.
Censorship, but they had people there who knew what to do with it.
Movies were better then. You know, I mean, there was new ground being made. There was they weren't retreading old ground. They were making new ground.
To be fair, around then there was still some crappy movies and TV shows.
Yeah, but even the crappy stuff is better than the better stuff that people think is on TV today. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's just.
Although I don't know if I bring back Herman's Head per se, but.
You know, I don't know. I mean, it just seems to me like, you know, the quality has gone down because. Like a lot of people say, TV is a different landscape today. You got a lot more channels out there, and if people don't like what you're putting on, they'll go watch something else, and that's not what they want. They want to keep all the viewers to the big three channels.
Nowadays, what you have is you have better ideas. You have ideas that are more open and more fleshed out. But again, here we go. They're presented on that trash can lid.
Yes.
You know, back in the old days, some of the ideas could be really dumb, but they could be presented really well. Now you have better ideas, but they're not. I mean, imagine if you had the good ideas of today with the good execution of the past.
Yeah.
I think you'd have gold. I mean...
I've seen shows like that on Netflix that really don't belong on Netflix. They should be on regular primetime television because they are so well done, but they don't last. They get canceled after 2 seasons. And why is that? Because I don't know. Maybe it's money. Maybe they're not getting enough money in advertising or something like that. But you see there is talent out there, but they don't get seen. They get hidden behind.
Right, and that's another thing. Nowadays, a lot of people, my goodness, I really, you know, because we have lower view counts, I don't want to hear people say, oh, well, Jeff and I are drinking a Statler and Waldorf. I don't want to, you know, I mean, oh, these were better when we were 20 or 10, you know. No.
You're going to say that because they didn't grow up in that time, so they don't know. But until
exactly. And then, you know, here we go. When we're 80, people who are 20 now, we say in their 40s, the 2018 was better. So, you know.
Yeah. Well.
You know, it's weird. I mean, there were people in the 90s who said the 50s were better. So.
It's an age. And when they reach our age, they'll know. They'll understand. You know.
You know, I'm still trying to keep in the middle ground here so I don't get too in my day, you know, that kind of thing. But I think with Star Trek, that's a key thing. It's not just a matter of things were always better years ago. I mean, season 3 TOS, thank you.
Yeah.
But like I said,
better than Discovery. Right. At least they had a message on that.
Well, that's why I brought the thing of the 25th anniversary thing. It's not, you know, I was hinting at that, you know. It's not just whoever shoots the bad guy is the winner.
Yeah.
That was my little wink.
Yeah.
You know. So, yeah, I can be uncensored and still be creative. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But, well, try to be creative. Sometimes I come up with stupid ideas too, but hey, you know.
Yeah, really. Yeah, who hasn't made some dumb ideas?
That was in the 60s, so.
Yeah.
Whatever. You didn't need censorship for that nonsense, but no, so it was it was a good anniversary special, and you know something, there's been like 2 since. I seen the 30th anniversary one, which I will not be doing a podcast on, end of story.
Yeah.
And the 40th anniversary, which is short, but basically recaps the first one.
Yeah.
I watched that too. It basically recaps the first one. So in terms of Star Trek anniversary shows, we didn't get a 50th. I wish they had done a really good 50th one.
The 50th was really was lost. I mean, they just let it slide without much.
Yeah, we had no discovery, no nothing. It was the middle of the.
And that's sad because 50 years is not something to just shrug off like, you know.
And then the weird thing is, we get another Kelvin Universe movie that tanks.
Yeah.
25th anniversary is like, okay, so the 50th anniversary comes up, you put out a tank movie? I mean, that wasn't fair. Because usually the 25th anniversary, I mean, I don't know the numbers on but Star Trek 6 seemed like it was the new best possible thing when it came out. It's like, that was the biggest deal.
Yeah.
But I'm taking that did pretty well.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, well, of course, it was coming after 5, but
yeah.
Which I mean, I don't.
Made quite a bit of money from
5 didn't do bad, did it? I mean, financially.
No, they did get some of their money back, just not as much as Paramount wanted, which made them doubt whether they wanted to do another movie after that. So
but I remember with 5 came out, I was like, okay, Star Trek 5 came out, and yeah, let's get on to 6 now. They were kind of like rushing to kind of get something else.
Yeah, they were already hammering out a sequel at that point.
I mean, it's funny with 4. It's like, oh, 4, we're going to have a Star Trek 5. Oh, boy, Star Trek 5. Yeah, we'll go to the next thing. You know, they were trying to get past that quick.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's like there was a lot of regret about 5.
Yeah.
And now that we've done the podcast on that, and that was the thing about the 25th anniversary that always got me. They skimmed right past 5 quick.
Yeah.
As if there was deep regret over that. But hey, you know, when you look back at Star Trek 5 and you think of what's been going on lately, you know, if that was a Star Trek fail in the old days, you know, a Star Trek movie like 5 would be a treat today, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, as scary as that sounds, that would be a treat today.
Yeah.
Because, you know, at least with all the goofiness of that, again, like Season 3 TOS, there's still that, what is it? I don't know what it is. It still has
humanity, that. The humanity.
It still has that Star Trek quality, that humanity quality. Yeah.
It wasn't just briefly touched on like in some of the modern stuff. It was basically predominant throughout the whole film. You know, where these people...
Yeah, it wasn't sprinkled on messages.
Yeah.
But like I said, the perception of Star Trek today versus the past, we could start a podcast like that at 9 o'clock and go on till 9 in the morning. It's a long... That could be an epic podcast, honestly.
It'd take as long as it's been on Star Trek, 10 years, you said a decade. It would take about that long to really go over the whole mess that it's gotten itself into, you know.
You know how changes are, though. You know, people can come along and say, oh, you know what that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years? Oh, forget about that. We got this better stuff.
I'm just hoping that one day CEOs will come and go out of these departments and somebody new will come along and say, okay, let's fix this. So that way it comes back the way it was. You know, I'm hoping that somebody will come back and breathe the life back into it that it doesn't have now.
Like it's back where it belongs. You know, that's, you know, kind of like, okay, let's retrench. Let's kind of get back on track here. Let's do a new series set in the future of the Star Trek universe and forget all this prequel stuff.
I wouldn't even go as far as explaining anything or trying to link anything to what's happening now. I would just start with something brand new and just forget about what the hell you saw.
Well, call this the sidebar.
Yeah.
Call this the sidebar. Like, those are alternate universes. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Let's go back to our own little world and go into the future.
Nemesis and continue on ahead like we were supposed to be doing all along, you know. Just
right, like I said, I would, you know, and when I saw that Gene Roddenberry dedication in the end, I felt the melancholy because you know, I've heard people say this, that, oh, you know what, why is so upset about Star Trek now? Star Trek died the day Gene Roddenberry did. And I always thought that was such a cynical attitude, but when I saw that, I said, was it a slow death after that? And I didn't realize it. Okay, I don't want to put him on a pedestal like that, but I mean, without him there and his lawyer to keep things going, did people just gradually go hogpile with it and we didn't notice it? I mean, it's a weird, upsetting notion that... It's
like you said, when First Contact came out, that's pretty much when it started, really.
Yeah, it was starting to... I mean, some people even go back to the beginning of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
It was like, it was gradually starting to kind of... You know, there was still enough of that Roddenberry-ness in there, but... You know, even with Voyager, but they were starting to kind of get a little off track then.
Yeah.
And until it just blew up, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know what? I'm wondering if the viewer counts are because You know, maybe people think we're complaining too much, and everybody does that about Star Trek. But I just wanted to add at the end of this.
Yeah.
This is not for you. This is for the audience. I did this before, and I'm going to do this again. Maybe we'll do this every video. I'm going to ask you for more subscribers. I know people run subscriber contests. Maybe in the first of the year, we'll try to do that. We'll give more shout-outs to subscribers. If you make comments, you know, I know I should be looking in there more, but I'm trying to share this and get it around. But I'll give people shout-outs who comment on what I do. And, you know, we'll add you on your Star Trek channel pretty much at this point if you add us. Oh, and if you want to see our notifications, click the little bell in the corner because that allows you to see what we have and you won't miss anything. That's probably what's happening. So we're just a young channel. We don't have a Patreon account or anything like that. And we're not going to have one as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much. I want to keep this indie. And so, you know, let's hope when Star Trek turns 60, by that point we'll be pretty close to 60 ourselves. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, let's hope that we're kind of back to that point and that unborn children of that time will be able to have that connection to seeing the world in a better place and seeing a positive future. Because I just wanted to add this. And yes, subscribe. Thank you. Please subscribe, everybody. But I wanted to add this to you to end it off. You know, I'm wondering if I see a lot of young 20-somethings now or teenagers now. They're convinced the world's going to end tomorrow, pretty much. They are convinced it's all coming apart. And I'm thinking, is this a realistic assessment, or are they just pumped full of these end-of-the-world sci-fi things they're getting now? Is their only articulation death and doom for humanity? I mean, you know, looking at activism back in '91, I was thinking, oh, yeah, so there's pollution. Let's go out and stop it. You know? Let's go out and do something. Now it's like this pollution. Oh, global warming, the world's doomed. We're all over. We're all dead. I think, because we are the culture that we are, you know, Greek have their oral mythology passed down from people through generations, and most countries do. Maybe the movies and television are our collective mythology. Maybe Star Trek is the American Iliad or the American Odyssey or the American Knights of the Round Table. It's our collective legend. It's our King Arthur, you know. So as much as Star Trek reflects our culture, I notice when Star Trek is really emphasizing its humanity and its message, life around us improves. When it isn't, things don't. So I guess that puts a lot of meaning to Star Trek, doesn't it? That it needs to because it is our collective mythology, we don't even realize it. I mean, I hear Star Trek-related phrases in the American lexicon. And the 20th anniversary reminded how it was already, you know, in that, coming into the language then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I think more people, and I'm sure you'd agree on this, in this day and age, you know, people still wear their Star Trek outfits, they still watch the show. Maybe they ought to sit down for a minute and think what it is they're looking for in this. What are they looking for in this? And I'll tell you, you told me yourself when you were watching Netflix, and you couldn't watch Star Trek anymore, and you called and they said that there's a huge watch count on it. You told me, Andre, there's something that's bringing these people to this. There's something that's bringing these people to this.
Yeah.
Maybe when they can figure out what that is, we can do better. But anyway, so please subscribe. And yes, we do preach a little bit, but, you know, we're not out here to basically prove to anybody out here in YouTube that Star Trek is bad because it's got this political agenda or that political agenda. We're just talking about writing and presentation. That's all. I like what Star Trek's agenda was about. I don't want to destroy that. I want to enhance that.
And I miss its quality.
Yes. And that quality goes with, if Star Trek stands for something other than let's just shoot each other up, I think the quality will improve. I think if something stands for something, they will work for it.
Yeah.
But you need to have something there first. And the 25th anniversary emphasized these people knew what the show stood for, what its influence was. They talked to Whoopi Goldberg. I forgot to mention that. She talked about, this was the first show I saw with any black people on it. So if you look at Star Trek like that, that's no small thing. I mean, you've influenced a whole cultural revolution. So, yeah, to any of you who have a problem with the SJW thing in Star Trek, you wouldn't be talking about that if it wasn't for Star Trek.
Yeah.
That lit the match. And, the 25th anniversary indicated that weird state that people are in now. Never mind where Star Trek is now. So maybe instead of worrying about going back or going to the past, maybe we ought to let this stuff go and go back to the future, if you want to know what I mean. Not the movie, but I mean, go back to the future in the sense of going back to looking at the future rather than going back to just going back. Something to think about. So, episode 31 coming up next week, and I think if things are going the way they're supposed to be going, we're going to be going back a little bit ourselves to the first Star Trek movie ever.
Yeah.
79. So, boy, this 25th anniversary brought up some broader points about Star Trek, and I knew that point would be big at the end.
Yeah, I mean,
because it when just watching it brought up that point. So
it's like you said, it's a reflection of the times that when that came out, of what Star Trek was at that point of its,
and the people working with it and working
Yeah.
on the show and what they were doing. So I mean, that was a well put together thing, but it showed you what passion those people had for it, passionately, as late Ricardo would say.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's it for now, and have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll get to the new year in the next one. Live long and prosper.